All right. Well, that was amazing. We learned so much about the financial side of this industry and what kinds of things you need to be thinking about. Our next panel is one to not miss. If you miss nothing else, don't miss this one. We have from Statehouse to Storefront. And we have an amazing panel here, and I'm going to be welcoming David Bowling to the stage. David, join me up here. Give it up for David. All right.
Hi. That was a lot of hype. I'm Dave Bowling. I'm the Executive Director for the Ohio Cannabis Coalition, and I'll go ahead and bring out my esteemed colleagues here. Senator Shane Wilkin and John Oberle of Ice Miller. I don't think we need to do that, but yeah, right. I'll let these guys introduce themselves as well real quick. So Shane, introduce yourself real quick. Sorry. Introduce yourself real quick.
Oh, thank you, David. State Senator Shane Wilkin. I represent the 17th Senate District of Ohio, which includes Highland, Fayette, Ross, Benton, Pike, Gallia, Jackson, Lawrence, Hocking, and a little bit of Perry County. So I have quite the district. I go to the lowest point in Ohio, which is South Point, farthest point south, and up to half of Perry County, New Lex, and that area right there. Very rural area, and have had the opportunity in the Senate to work on Senate Bill 56, which I'm sure most of you know about, and work a lot with David and the folks at OHCANN. So it's a pleasure to be here, my second year in a row, and I'll probably say some things that you like and probably say some things that you would rather me not say. But I will do this. I will tell you exactly where I am on everything, and we can go from there.
We appreciate Senator Wilkin more than he knows. So. Go ahead and introduce yourself, John.
Okay. Thanks, David. And it's great to be here today. My name is John Oberle. I'm a partner with the Ice Miller Law Firm. Been with the firm for 25 years. I'm a local official for 21 years. So practice in the cannabis space throughout the country, and really look forward to being in this panel and sharing some insight.
Great. Thanks, John. So John, just kick us off. Tell us where we are with marijuana in Ohio.
Great, thanks, David. So, really, we've got a lot to cover today. I think the state of the industry in Ohio is good. I think we're in a good spot. Really depends on the company that you are, right? I think there's the good, the bad, and the ugly with the industry, and I think a lot of it depends on your debt level, right? Most of the companies, I think, are doing strong, but there are some receiverships. There's companies that are working through issues. But globally, I think the industry is in a good spot. And I think a lot of it has to do with the leadership of OHCANN, with David and Adrian and Andy Rayburn and the board. I think they've been really strong advocates for the industry in Ohio. And it's amazing. We've been issue 2 passed in November of 2023. That was where the adult use proposal came live. Our firm, was involved at the table of helping to write issue 2, but we've come a long way since 2023, 2.5 years. And I think what I would say is the battles were tough in Ohio over the last 2 years. I think any time that you do an initiative petition to bring a new law to a state, you're going to have pushback. We had pushback from leadership in Ohio, from the legislature, right? There was a lot of people concerned that cannabis was in Ohio. So I think we had some really big threats with the industry, and everyone in this room worked very hard to educate the legislature, work with the administration, and I think what we ended up was having the legislature finally put their mark with Senate Bill 56, and that really, I think was on balance a good bill, a thoughtful bill with the senator's leadership and others. We got to a good place, and I think where Ohio ended up is being a control state, right? We're a limited market state. We've got limited licenses, just like other industries, like liquor, the state agency stores. We have limited licenses, so I think that is really helpful. And it's really now a time for the industry to exhale. We are at a point where we had threats. We thought that the legislature was going to really change the program and put some really, strong controls on. But we also had the threat of the hemp, the hemp, intoxicating hemp throughout Ohio. And with the leadership in the legislature, Senate Bill 56, having the prohibitions putting into Ohio law is making a huge difference on the cannabis industry. And the fact that the referendum failed to repeal the hemp prohibitions in Senate Bill 56, that made a very big difference. I think people can exhale. Licenses are coming online. We've got 37 cultivators, 46 processors, over 200 dispensaries operational, with more coming online. So we're really seeing a maturation of the industry. But I would say, and I think I'll stop with this, I think it's cannabis. You take 2 steps forward and there's always 1 step back, right? There's always something, some storm cloud on the horizon that we have to manage. And I think we'll talk about a lot of that today. So I think that's just a general overview, I think, where we stand in Ohio.
Great, thanks, John. And you kind of touched on it. So my first question kind of for you all is, do you think that with rescheduling, obviously, we have that news that recently came out. Do you think that rescheduling is a stamp of approval for what we're doing here in Ohio and actually what the legislature did on intoxicating hemp?
I do, and it's all that everybody is talking about, right? I think it's kind of the 2 steps forward. Rescheduling was good for the industry, but it's really a quarter of a loaf, right? It gives us some progress, but the loaf is not fully baked. We have a lot further to go. We've got a lot to understand. I know we're working through it. We're communicating with the Division of Cannabis Control how it gets implemented. But I think it is, David, to your question, it is really an indication that the current structure works, right? That's not going to undo the regulated market. I think it is a stamp of approval. But when you look at all the Ohio operators, you look at the stock prices, it really didn't move the needle, right, in terms of, a lot of Wall Street support that this is really going to have a huge impact. So a lot to understand. But look, it is good for 280E. It's good for the medical, the tax deductions. It provides some clarity to the market, but I think it also really creates a lot of questions. In talking with the Division of Cannabis Control, we've got a great regulator, Jim Canepa, and his leadership team. David used to be part of that leadership team. I think what they want to make sure is that the license holders in this room and in Ohio are not put at a disadvantage, right? There's going to be guidance federally on allocation, and when you're taking the medical benefit from the tax benefits from rescheduling to Schedule 3, is Ohio structure correct? We've got an adult use license, we've got dual use licensing. Do we need to make changes to the licensing to make sure that Ohio operators are fully benefiting from that? We were talking in our prep call with the senator. Is there changes in Ohio law that are going to put the Ohio industry on par with rescheduling? Is there tax issues? So I think there's going to be a working group. We're going to work through those issues. But the bottom line is we've got to make sure that the next hearing in June that the adult use and recreational is part of moving to Schedule 3. But David, I do think we're going to see some other benefits from rescheduling for Ohio. There's going to be, I think we're going to see potentially FDIC banks determine, can they be in the marketplace? We've got great state chartered institutions in Ohio through the Division of Financial Institutions that are lending in this space. We've got private lenders, but I think you're going to see others get into the lending space. I think you're going to see cost of capital potentially go down, which will benefit the Ohio operators. And I also think you're going to see more deal activity, right, because of it. So I'm excited about the change. I think we've got a lot to continue to work on.
Senator, do you agree? Do you and your colleagues feel like you did the right thing with Senate Bill 56? And does the rescheduling news kind of validate that?
So I will preface with, I'm not speaking for any of my colleagues.
Fair.
I am simply speaking for me and giving you my own personal opinion, and my opinion in some instances of where I believe our caucus is, the majority caucus at the Ohio Senate. Yeah, did a lot of work on Senate Bill 56, and I think we addressed some things. I think there was a lot of misnomers out there of what it actually did. Probably one of the biggest ones I would get calls that says, "You're telling me I can't grow it at home anymore." And I'm like, "That's not true. That is not true. I'm not telling you can't grow it at home. We're simply saying, here's what you're allowed to grow. This is supposed to be consumption, not distribution from a home. And all the research we've done, this what you can grow at home should be plenty." We addressed a lot in the hemp side of it, and I think there was a very well laid out policy or research into the fact that a lot of the hemp products, specifically the ingestibles. We had a gentleman who was testifying, went within like a mile of the Statehouse and just bought stuff from these hemp stores, and they're all were presented to be just like marijuana, just THC or Delta 8, Delta, all these things. Then that group actually, probably with some of your help, paid to have these sent off and analyzed, and didn't come back very good. So what we found out was a lot of these edibles that we addressed in Senate Bill 56 they didn't appear to be very safe. There was no testing. We had no idea where they were coming from. Pretty good idea. They might have been coming from overseas, specifically China. But there was no way to track. There was no way that if you got a bad batch of what do you do? You guys know full well, your stuff's tracked just a little bit. Jim Canepa, who I really appreciate. Jim's a hard line. Here's the rule, and as long as you're in the rule, I don't think you have any problems out of Jim. You get outside the rules, you're going to have a big problem with Jim. So I rely on him a lot to talk about. I'm like, here's what I'm thinking. Here's where I'm at. So I guess because I was on it, I think Senate Bill 56 was pretty darn good. When you talk about rescheduling, I'm going to leave that more for guys like John, the attorneys, because the one thing I can promise you, regardless of what bill we pass or what comes down from the feds, is if you have two of John's and one's on one side and one's on the other, they will read the bill completely differently. And they'll say, "Oh no, it doesn't say that I can't do X, Y, or Z." Or the other side saying, "Yeah, but it doesn't say you can." And that's where the Ohio legislature is going to have to come in and say, here's our take on this, and here's where we're at. So are there things to be done? Probably. The other thing in our call, I said, you have to understand that, and this myself included, and I feel like I've done a fair amount of work in this space. I am not a cannabis expert or remotely close. Well, I doubt it. But, I don't know as much as you guys know about. So part of the legislative process is trying to educate yourself, but you got to understand, really none of my colleagues are what I would call experts on the hemp space or the marijuana or hemp space practically, for all practical purposes. So we rely on groups like OHCANN that you guys are probably mostly members of to help educate us, to tell us that, how does this work? How do you get to this? And we had the same thing on the hemp stuff. Well, if hemp's supposed to be non-intoxicating, how do you get it intoxicating? And some of the things that I was told doesn't sound very good. So that's why I think you saw the results. As far as the banking, I'm kind of like, we have it. It's here. It's the law. I think I told you guys last time around, full disclosure, I was opposed to recreational use. I lost, and my job as a legislator is to deal with what is in front of me. So we want to make the market and the system as fair and equitable as possible, but most importantly, we want it safe for the consumers that choose to participate in it. And I'm not one when somebody says, "Oh, Michigan is a lot cheaper." I'm not really concerned about Michigan because I talked to a guy in Michigan and he's like, "Our companies are collapsing left and right. It's too cheap." And I might be wrong, but probably most of you want to make some money, I would think. So you don't want the super cheapest price. And it's kind of like, you know, there's different cars you can buy. Do you want the cheapest one, or you want the one that serves your purpose the best? So the other thing you mentioned is, you know, when we talk about some things, I own a carryout, and we have state liquor stores, and you have beer, wine, and diluted alcohol, like the stuff that I can sell. I'm not a state liquor agency. So when people talk about, well, could we do this? Could we do that? Are there some appetites to move things around? Possibly, but I think the big thing is we also need to protect your investment and not just suddenly open the floodgates and allow anybody to come in and do whatever they want. I don't think that's a fair, to set the rules up and then say, we appreciate all of you guys that played by the rules, but now we're going to change them and let anybody do whatever. So that's.
Right. Since you touched on beverages real quick, I'll go ahead and ask the big question. Is there potential for a veto override on the beverage side of things in Senate Bill 56?
Again, prefacing that this is my point of view. I had a conversation with some of the beverage folks. You know, we did make an exception in Senate Bill 56 to allow the hemp beverages. Here's the reason for this, is it was a conversation with Jim Canepa. The beverages are tested, and they can tell you where all the beverages came from. He ran some stuff, and he goes, actually, some of their tests are more stringent than what we are. So if Jim was comfortable with that, I was comfortable with it to allow them to go until the federal date, which is it November 12th, 13th, somewhere in there. We were good with allowing them to go to that date. For whatever reason, a lot of the folks in that industry pushed to have it through the end of the year. I encouraged them not to do that because I think you're starting to overreach. Plus, if you guys know the distribution laws, that once it's federally illegal, which would have happened in November, every warehouse that was doing distribution would have said that stuff's got to go. It's illegal. I can't have it. I'm not going to risk my distributorship for these beverages. But they pushed, and this is strictly my gut feeling. So don't take this to the bank that Senator Wilkin said this is why the governor did something. I think it kind of made the governor upset, and that's the reason he vetoed that particular part of the bill, and they got shut off the same time all of the edibles and ingestibles did. As for the veto override, so more specific to your question, I can tell you that I sat in a caucus meeting, and it got brought up, and I did not hear like a roaring chorus that yes, we want to override this. And my personal opinion again is veto override should be a really big deal. You shouldn't do it just to poke someone in the eye or whatever. If there's a consensus of there's got to be a good solid reason as to why you're doing a veto override, and that it makes a lot of sense. I totally get the beverage guys that have invested and put their money out, but you're playing a little bit with fire in the aspect that we didn't know exactly where this was. And the rumor on the street is, well, the feds are going to make a change. Well, when they do, fine, we can address it then. But I'm not going to stake my vote on what may happen at the federal level. Let's see what happens, as you said, in June. If there's anybody that's going to address it, we can go from there. But my personal opinion is no. Now, I also had people tell me that, well, there's only a couple of no's. And my response was, I'm doing you the courtesy of being honest, and I think some people are not, because I do not believe the numbers they were giving me of the yeses to the no's. So I don't know if that's enough to answer your question.
That's great. Yeah, please.
I mean, really great commentary. It sounds like no override is likely, but I think the battle on THC beverages is not over, right? I mean, one of the things we talked about, if Ohio being a control state, I think Ohio and with the wisdom of the legislature, they typically do things similar. If you look at the liquor law, there's spirituous liquor is only sold at 400 stores. I know 400 or 500 stores. We talked about that. I think there is a model for THC beverages. The voters in November of 2023 in issue 2, they passed having beverages as a form that is allowable in Ohio, right? I think there's a strong market for beverages, and I think the question is, how does that get implemented? Does it get implemented? My first comment, though, is I think the hemp beverage industry has not given up the battle. If you look, there is at least 3 or more court cases pending throughout Ohio, Sandusky, Columbus, and a couple other jurisdictions. And I think what you're finding is that they're challenging Senate Bill 56, the prohibitions, really on 3 legal claims. One is the Dormant Commerce Clause, that they're discriminating against out-of-state commerce. They're arguing that the governor's veto was done improperly, and I don't think that is correct. I don't think that is a winning argument. But they're also claiming that it was dormant single subject, that under the Ohio Constitution, when a bill is passed, it has to have a single subject, and they're claiming that's a violation. And I think what we're going to find is there's been a TRO, there is very limited application that certain hemp businesses can continue to operate in Ohio. There was a preliminary injunction hearing on Tuesday, I think in Sandusky. I think there's one next Monday in Franklin County. And I think we're going to see a mix of decisions. I think we're going to see victories by the hemp industry with limited application. We're going to see victories with the Attorney General intervening. We're going to see victories on the state side saying that Senate Bill 56 was done properly. But at the end of the day, I started off as a gaming lawyer back in 2009 with the constitutional amendment. When gaming came to Ohio, there was a gray market machines, Cherry Masters. There's probably some in everyone's district, you'll probably remember. And there was court cases where they would win and lose. And I think it's going to play out over the next year. But I think eventually the courts will settle that the legislature got it right, that the law is correct in the prohibitions in Senate Bill 56. With that said, I think we're going to see legislative lobbying continue. I think it's going to be both on the hemp side, but I think also on the traditional cannabis side, you're going to see a push for THC beverages because they are popular. I think you can do it under a current law. You can have the production, so I think that is possible. But I think we may even see Ohio, unlike some states like Indiana or other states, has the initiative process where you can go to the ballot to pass laws. I could see folks trying to do further changes on the hemp side. So a lot of success, a lot of current uncertainty, but I think the future is going to resolve itself soon.
David, if I can, I would just say that I think that explanation was great and proves my point that if you have 2 attorneys willing to argue, you can fall. They'll fall on either side. Typically, which side is footing the bill. But that said, and I don't blame you. I'm just not an attorney. But that said, he mentioned earlier we do have the state liquor agencies. Well, is that a spot? Because one of the things I've heard about the beverages, and I was glad because I was starting to question myself that you can make THC beverages now. But one of the things I've heard is they take up a lot of space in your dispensaries, and maybe getting them out at a broader audience would be a possibility. I want to make sure I clarified. I'm okay with beverages that are tested and tracked. Like I'm good with that. I'm not good with them if it's marijuana, if it's THC marijuana beverages, then I think it's got to be very controlled, like state liquor or in dispensaries. So I'm not saying I'm a hard no on drinks. I kind of fall under the guidance of Director Canepa and the aspect if they can be tested and tracked, then I'm much better with it than not.
Do you think that's something that we could get done this year, or are we like John said, we're exhaling right now?
Probably next week.
May, right? Yeah.
That would probably be a big push, and so you understand, the the legislature is representative of their districts and their people. And we talked, I said, you have some people that if the word marijuana is in the bill and it's not, we're getting rid of it, they are a no, and they don't really need to hear anything else about it. They are a no. I think that's a wrong approach in the aspect that, hey, the voters voted it in statewide, so we've got to deal with it the best we can, regardless of where you fall on the issue personally. But just know that it doesn't mean they're bad guys, or ladies. It just means that for them, it's a personal thing they can't get by, and that's the way it goes sometimes.
Yeah, one of the topics that we talked about, I think where people really care about, I think everyone in this room understands where we are, what the current structure, the leadership of the legislature, getting certainty in Senate Bill 56. We've got a good regulator, the rules are about to be adopted, but I think people want to know in this room, where do we look in the future, right? What do we have to be planning our businesses for from compliance perspective? What are the different threats? But a couple things I think are really important. This is a really major election year in Ohio, right? We're going to have a new governor. We're going to have new potentially changes at the DCC, Division of Cannabis Control, depending on who the regulator is, and where is the governor going to be on cannabis, right? I think is important. We're going to have a new Senate president, right? That is coming. So the Senate president currently has been a great leader, is likely potentially to become lieutenant governor. So that could impact things. But there's two things that I think are really important to consider. A lot of the candidates for governor are running on policy reform, specifically taking back property taxes, which have skyrocketed in Ohio, back down. And I know the legislature has passed 4 bills or more to deal with those issues and shown a lot of leadership, but property tax is going to be potentially reduced in the legislature next year, depending on who's governor in that initiative. And there's going to be a further push to reduce the income tax or repeal the income tax. What does that mean? That I think, I don't want to speak, but in my view, the legislature could be looking, or the next governor, for funding. And where are they going to get it? Is it tax increases? Is it more licenses? How does that impact us? So I think with the leadership of OHCANN, with the leadership of people in this room, we need to be prepared and be a part of those tables. Because the senator talked about, if you're in a state where you have unlimited licenses or cheap prices, you're not going to have as good of an industry, I think. So we've got to be able to have those message points. The other thing I'd point out is that if you look at our state to the west of Indiana, there's a lot of discussions coming out by the governor that maybe it's time for medical. The speaker has made comments in the paper this week. I know one of my colleagues is in the room from Indiana as well, but I think Indiana has a great potential to go live or pass legislation next year. And if that happens, what does that mean? If you think about the money that is coming from Indiana to Ohio, what does that do to our operators? Understanding what Pennsylvania is going to do, if there's going to be passage of new laws there. So I think we've made 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and we've got to really plan as an industry and be thoughtful, working with OHCANN and the leadership in the Senate and the House on policy reform.
Shane, just give us like a 30-second gut check. What could we work on? What kind of things could we actually get done in the next year and a half or so?
So asking me to finish in 30 seconds is going to be incredibly difficult.
And in 50 seconds.
You give somebody the mic and they go on. This probably sounds like a commercial for OHCANN. It's not, but here's one thing you find in the legislature very quickly. There's groups, there's lobbyists that come to you, and they're genuine, they're honest, and they give you, here is as much factual information as I can. Then the really good ones will say, here's on the other side. This is what they're going to argue against us for. And then our job as policymakers is to figure out where we want to be based off of that. OHCANN does a really good job of getting in front of us and letting us know, here's the issues for our members. here's what the other side's going to tell you. That's incredibly, incredibly important. Because when you have a lobbyist that comes into your office, and with term limits, I'll tell you right now, lobbyists are incredibly important. They have more knowledge than a lot of the vast majority of the legislators. Because you figure in 8 years, we're out. You know, in some cases, I've been able to come from the House to the Senate, but I didn't even fulfill all my House terms before I switched. Having somebody that has the knowledge and you trust is a big, big deal. So that I'm very grateful to have that relationship with. As far as what we can get done, again, this is a personal thing. I think there's the focus. If there's anything else, it's going to be more on property tax than anything else. I doubt if we get anything major done before the end of the year. With the election year that we have coming with governor, I don't know there's going to be anything crazy done on any aspect of it. So of across the board, unless something really, an emergency arises.
Thanks, appreciate that. Let me just say real quick that we appreciate having Senator Wilkin in the legislature. He is a great partner, and he too is honest back, just in the same way that he complimented us about. So appreciate him, appreciate both these guys. I think we're out of time.
Dave, I'd say one last thing is, Dave asked me before we come out, he goes, do you get nervous on public speaking at all? I'm like, not really, but I do not recall the lights being this bright last year, and I can't see anybody out there. So it's a bit intimidating. I don't know what anybody's doing, what faces they're making. All I can see is
I'll have to read the room.
figures.
Well, yeah, I'm going to bring my sunglasses next time. But look, I think David said it really well. I think we talked about leadership changes. We've got a great senator here. We've got leadership in Ohio. It's important for folks in this room to support organizations like OHCANN that are supporting the industry, but also leaders like Shane and others who are open door, listening, and trying to get to the right result. I think being active is very, very important for this industry. Be in the room, go to events, and spread the message and educate is really, really important for our industry. So thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
All right, give it up for Statehouse to Storefront. Did I tell you that was a panel not to be missed? And one thing I definitely want to touch on is OHCANN. You guys are really lucky here in Ohio to have such a wonderful trade association. We struggle with that in Illinois. And so I know they didn't want to do a commercial for OHCANN, and I have no affiliation with it, but it's really important to support your local organizations because they really can help drive your business forward.